Is trouble coming? Are we going down? Mother, daughter, and your brother too. Get your mind straight when it's up to you. Hey, you gotta see the storm a-coming. Hey, you gotta feel it coming through. Hey, you gotta see the storm a-coming. Whoa, it's coming after you.
Okay, today's date is May the 17th of 2020. We're pleased to have a guest here today, Patrick Doughtie. He's a writer of best-selling book, Letters to God, and I'm the host, Greg Segroves, and then you have Jimmy Catrone is my co-host, and my grandson is a producer, Connor McDaniel. How's it going, Patrick?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you having me on.
Well, yeah, when do we meet each other? I think it
Oh,
was what about 2015, somewhere in there.
ish. Yeah, right around there.
When did
Maybe
you?
a little bit before that.
Okay, um, but anyway, we've known each other for a pretty good while, and Patrick is in law enforcement. He used to be with the Murfreesboro Police Department, and you worked for Nashville for a while, didn't you?
I did. I worked for Metro for
Okay,
7 years.
yeah, and then now he's an SRO with Rutherford County Schools District. And tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, were you born here
I was not. I'm a rambling man, I guess. With I was born in Kentucky. My folks are from Virginia. And by the time I was 4, I'd lived in Kentucky, Indiana, Virginia, and then we wound up in California in the late 60s, just before 1970. Lived there, went through high school there and graduated high school, and then joined the military and went back there for a little bit. And then
Yeah.
I moved here to Nashville area in 1991.
Okay. You told me an interesting story about when you were in the military. I know you were stationed in Frankfurt, right?
Yeah.
And but anyway, there used to be a terrorist group called Biner Monhof Gang. And the reason I know about that is because I had to go to, I was in the Tennessee Air National Guard with Security Police Unit, and we were called to guard an air show over there in Frankfurt at Rhine-Main, 1983. And anyway, it was a pretty scary time because they were blowing up, you know, setting bombs off
Right.
everywhere, and I know we were there because altogether they called in about 450 military policemen from all over the world. Because this is, you know, because of the terrorism, they had closed off the base pretty much, you know, for a long time.
Right.
And this was the first air show that they had had in years, and so they were training us to be on the lookout for bombs, and you know, there was all kinds of, you know, like demonstrations. They were expecting demonstrations. They were even talking about a device called a wrist rocket where you could, you know, it's like a slingshot that fired, what do you call them, the little round balls. I can't remember, but ball bearings, you know.
All right.
And we were prepared for everything. We were taking riot control. We had dogs sniffing everywhere and all that. And of course, nothing materialized. You know, the most excitement we had that day was we did have an F-104, you know, crash on the Autobahn, kill 5 people.
Oh,
We were expecting all this other stuff and had a plane crash. You
right, right.
know. But you were telling me, now what years are you over there?
I joined in '84, got there late '80, no, the beginning of '85, and I was there through, 2 years. I was there 2 years. So
Where
uh,
you? No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I started off in Hanau,
Yeah.
and then I did a temporary duty assignment in Frankfurt, which
Right,
is the
right.
story you're talking about, and then back to Hanau. Then they sent us to Wildflecken to
Yeah.
finish out my term there.
Were you there when they set up a bomb at Rhine, Maine, and killed the Air Force dependent and airmen?
I vaguely remember there were so many. Fortunately at that time there weren't any major conflicts going on, so I wasn't sent into combat anywhere.
Right.
But the biggest threat we had all around Germany was constant car bombs and bombings
Right.
of military installations, such, which is the one that we had when I was in Frankfurt.
Right. Okay. Now you were telling me a story about they had a PX downtown, right?
Right.
In downtown Frankfurt, and you were supposed to be. They set a bomb off, right?
Yes.
And you were supposed to be there that day, but you had got off or something.
Yep. Because we had been working, long days and shifts, and
Right.
it just happened to be like that was my rotation. I was on PX guard.
Right.
Yeah, where we're checking underneath cars and all that stuff, make sure there was no vehicles entering
Right.
the compound with bombs attached or anything like that. And I'd worked like 12 or 13 days straight, and they finally gave me one day off. And that day that I had off, the guy
Yeah.
that took my place, there was a bomb that went off
Yeah.
in a vehicle that was parked just outside the complex where
Wow.
I should have been.
Yeah. Now nobody got killed, right?
No, no,
Okay.
he did get a Purple Heart. He got injured.
Yeah.
But no one died, thankfully.
Yeah. That's something I tell people all the time. It doesn't matter where you're. Once you put the uniform on, you don't have to be in a war.
Right.
You're giving the government a blank check, and you're saying you do anything with me you want to, and it doesn't matter if you get killed on the sands of Iwo Jima or if you get killed from a PX in Frankfurt, Germany.
Right.
You're still dead.
Absolutely.
You
That's
know?
absolutely right.
Yeah. So, okay. So you say you came here in '91. When did you go work for the police department?
I didn't. I did that a little later in life. In '91, I moved here for a music career.
Right.
Brother and I were pursuing music. Did that for about 5 years until I had my first son. Then decided I need to kind of grow up and get a real job.
Right.
So I got
Right.
into construction for a while, and I did that for about 12 years
Right.
until my oldest son was diagnosed with medulloblastoma, which is a brain tumor.
Now, is that a rare form of cancer?
It is rare. Back then, it was even more uncommon than it is today. It seems like it's become more and more common. I
Right.
guess as far as it's a childhood cancer.
Right.
I forgot the numbers. I could spout off all the figures back then, but I haven't really researched
Right.
in quite some time. But it was quite rare for that type of brain tumor. We wound up at St. Jude in Memphis.
Right.
Excuse me. That's where he received a brain surgery, and then his chemo and radiation were
Right.
through there.
Let's see. Now he was born in 2005, right?
No, he was born in 1995.
Oh, 1995.
Yeah, 05. He passed away in 05.
Okay. Well, I was reading I've tried to read as much as I could on the internet about you, in your book and all that. And I seemed like I saw somewhere they had written he was born in 2000. Well, I think it was when they were doing the credits of the movie. It looked like they said 2000. He was born in 2005, died in 2015.
No, actually, I noticed that because it was 1995 in September because he was born,
Right.
I want to say 17 days after me.
Oh.
Because I was born September 8th.
So I look.
there you
So
go.
I guess I misread it.
Mix up the dates.
Yeah.
A little bit. That's okay.
It's all right.
It's okay.
I can't even remember where we're recording the podcast apparently. So
Okay.
That's why you get those big bucks.
Yeah. Now, well, first of all, when did you start noticing, a change in your son? Now, how old was he when he first got sick?
He was 7 when he was diagnosed, and the thing was with him, I guess with it
So
being
that's
a
about 2002,
it was 03.
03.
Yeah,
Okay.
2003. I started noticing he was very athletic. Played soccer, was a superb soccer player,
Right.
but he'd started getting these headaches.
Right.
And at the time, I'm thinking to myself, this isn't normal for
Yeah.
a 6, 7-year-old to have frequent headaches and as
Right.
extensive as they were. And they progressively got worse, and it got to a point where I remember, because I was the commissioner of the Nashville Youth Soccer Association at that time, so I'd show up on Saturday mornings, at 7 a.m., and I was there,
Yeah.
till the last soccer game was over. But he'd played that afternoon, and he'd got a little overheated and what have you, and he started complaining of a headache, and he wound up falling asleep in my truck while he was waiting on me. But I just was paying attention, and I took him to his pediatrician, and she tried to say it was allergies and so forth, and prescribed some allergy medication, which gave him one dose of that. He threw up, and I was like, I'm not going to give it to him. So and that was like early in the season. So September, October, while we're going through soccer season, December of that year, they were progressively getting worse, like I said, and he was over a friend's house and was playing basketball, and he threw up. He had a headache. He threw up. So I started seeing changes.
Right.
And it was New Year's Eve, and I remember him. All of a sudden he's not himself. He said, "I'm getting a headache. I think I'm going to bed." And it was 8 o'clock. I was kind of hoping he'd sit up, closer to midnight with us. Well, about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, he woke me up because I heard him throwing up. And he proceeded to throw up about every 30, 45 minutes until, 8 o'clock the next morning. And I made a phone call on New Year's Day to the pediatrician, letting her know, what's going on, and I need him to be seen. And I was told, take him to the ER. Her fear was more that he would become dehydrated and so forth. And he was lethargic. It was at the point where he was, one of the times he was trying to make it to the bathroom, is crawling on the floor. Well, I got him to the hospital, and he wasn't bleeding or anything, so obviously we had to sit and wait. And it was hours before he was seen. And by the time he was seen, he was feeling fine, acting normal, which was on par for how he had been acting over the last few months. This young ER doctor came walking in the room, said, "Well, what can I do for you?" And I said, "Check him for a brain tumor." And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, "Why would you think he has a brain tumor?" I said, he's 7 years old. He's getting headaches, and they're becoming more frequent, closer together. He's starting to vomit. I said, I just want him checked. So he did, the little neurological check on him, here, squeeze my fingers, stand on one foot, that kind of stuff. And he said, "Well, he seems fine to me." And I kept pressing, check him for a brain tumor. I get a scan, something. So they did schedule him a few days later for a CT scan, which was in the evening. And we went in for the scan and had to wait, a couple days for results. And I can remember, because at that time I was working for a construction company as a superintendent. And I remember getting the phone call, and I was sitting up on the hill and, talking to the doctor that I guess had determined what he'd seen on the scan. And he said, "Well, we see a shadow." And I said, "What's that mean?" And he said, "Well, we're not really sure. We'd like him to come back in. We'll do an MRI on him." Which of course, I'm a Christian. I'm praying, that it's not what they think it is, or it's not what I'm feeling like it is. Well, we went in for the MRI, and sure enough, it was a brain tumor. And they said it was about the size of a BB. And they said they were very lucky they caught it so early. And I'm like, you're welcome. Because it's almost like I
Yeah.
had to force them to do
Right.
something. I just looked like a crazy dad, I guess. But they called it medulloblastoma, and they told me it was a rare childhood tumor. And they wanted to do the surgery there, and they were kind of pressing for it. And I was doing some research. I met with the doctor. Did not like the neurosurgeon that they were going to hook him up with. In fact, he was an expert in neurosurgery, but the question that I asked him was, how many children have you done brain surgeries on?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, well, it doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
Child's brain and adult's brain, it's the same thing. And I'm no doctor, but I'd already been doing some research, and I already knew there was a difference between a child's brain who's still developing and an adult brain.
Yeah.
One slight, move
Yeah.
on a child's brain, and you can affect their learning. You can affect
Right.
so many different things.
Right.
So I started researching, and I was asking God, just show me where to take him. And I came across, I'd heard of St. Jude, but wasn't really fully aware of what they did. But in my search, St. Jude popped up, and I started reading, and then I sent an email, gave all the symptoms and everything that had been going on, and that was over a weekend. And first thing Monday morning, I got a call from Dr. Gajar, who ended up being his
Right.
oncologist, asked me some questions and basically scared me to death because he
Mhm.
said he's got to have a surgery, and the sooner the better. When can you get here? And I'm thinking, well, let me restructure my work, and maybe sometime next week. He goes, no, I'm talking about today or tomorrow
Wow.
morning.
Yeah.
So I made arrangements, and we left the next morning and went down there,
Yeah.
for his surgery and stuff. But
You reminded me so much of my experience. Don't get me wrong. I've never lost a child. I came very close. I lost my parents when I was 12, and
right,
tragically, and I know what that feels like. And
Sure.
but I can't imagine losing a child. And Misty, her,
Right.
she came as close as you can to dying back in 2007, and a doctor, she went into a pain clinic, and a doctor gave her a shot in her neck, to alleviate the pain. She'd had a wreck. This was kind of last resort, she'd been through
Right.
all these treatments and trying to alleviate the pain. And so the next thing I know, I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm seeing doctors and nurses running to and fro and like crazy, and she's the only one back there because I'm thinking, oh
Right.
crap, And so I'm trying to flag them down. They're just ignoring me like I'm not there, And so finally, one of the nurses comes out. She's as rattled as I am, okay, and she says, I hate to tell you, your daughter turned blue, and her heart stopped on the table, and we had
Oh,
to call
geez.
paramedics. And all this had happened with me sitting in the waiting room. They
Right.
didn't, get me or anything. And well, anyway, so when I go back, I'm getting ready. I said, well, where'd y'all take her? And they said, Williamson County Hospital. So I'm getting ready to go to the hospital to be there with her. And the doctor said, I want to talk to you a minute. So I go back there, and he's about as rattled as a nurse, and he's saying, well, if I'd done anything wrong, she would have went into a seizure. So I think she just had a bad panic attack. Okay, now
Oh,
heart
good
stopped.
grief.
I've never heard of a
Heart
heart
for a
stopping
panic
because of a
attack.
panic
Right.
attack. And he pointed to a skeleton. He said, "Well, this is what I would have had to hit if if she'd have had that problem." And I didn't do that.
Don't sue me for malpractice.
Basically trying to cover his tracks.
Yeah. So
Had I done this,
So actually, it's making me feel a little bit better because I thought, because you're in a situation like that, you're hoping for the best, you know.
right?
And so I get to the hospital, and she's posturing. she's in seizure. You know, she's on a
Oh.
respirator. They're fighting to save her. You know,
Good grief.
and for 2 or 3 days we didn't even know she's gonna live. You know, and you know, she was 32, 33 years old then, but I mean, still your child. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
and you know, for a year she didn't even know she was in the world. I mean, her what had happened? This is where you know you kind of reminded me of all this. You going through the doctors makes me have a lot of confidence in them, especially with the COVID-19
Oh,
going on
right.
right now.
Yeah.
But but anyway, the first night, you know, she's still in a coma, and this neurosurgeon comes in and he says, it threw us a curveball. You know, he brings us in the back room and he says, I think your daughter's got a brain tumor. You know, and I'm thinking, oh crap, you know, and so anyway, the next day, a different neurosurgeon, well, he's not a neurosurgeon, neurologist, he comes
Right.
in and he's been looking at the x-rays and he said, well, I think your daughter has a blood clot. Okay, totally different from what the other guy
Right.
said. Okay,
Yeah, blood clot,
So-
brain tumor. I mean, same
so so anyway, so a few days later, after she finally came out of the coma and everything, and you know, she, you know, the doctor, we went to see the doctor. He had a appointment, and they released her from the hospital and everything. He says, well, I think she's going to be all right because it's kind of like a bruise. You know, a bruise will go away after a few days, you know. So she had a regularly scheduled appointment with this neurosurgeon, and went in, he x-rayed her. Well, come to find out, what they had said was a bunch of crap.
Uh-huh.
This blood clot was expanding into her brain, you know,
Oh, good
and
grief.
she was in danger of dying, you know. So they had to do brain surgery on her, you know, and so anyway, there was something else I wanted to say about that. Oh, the guy that was doing the brain surgery, we were sitting in the office and all these people were sitting around us, and they were telling horror stories about this guy, talking about how bad he was, how he did so and so this way and so. And I had no control because she was married and her husband was calling shots, you know.
Right.
So it wasn't nothing but prayer that saved that girl because
Right.
she had brain surgery. They removed it was like an aneurysm or whatever, but I came so close to losing her that for
Right.
a year after, every time I'm around, all I want to do is hold her. You know,
Right. Right.
I just and I can't imagine losing a child. You know, and so my heart goes out to you. But getting back to your story,
Well, I wanted to, comment on it. Basically, you're Maddie then, right?
Yes.
There you go.
Thanks for catching that. That's
Because I'm like beat for beat, all the way down to like it happening, like him throwing up over and over again all night
Right.
and during the holidays,
yeah.
which I thought was more of a narrative device, but turns out that happened,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Well, no.
Yeah, and I appreciate you catching that. There's so many
Yeah.
people that watch the movie and they go, "Wait a minute."
Well, that wasn't in the
You're
movie.
still
he
alive.
he read the book.
Well, no, between the book or the movie, they're looking at me and they go, "Wait a minute,
Yeah.
you didn't die."
Yeah,
was like-
man.
And then I have to explain the whole thing. It's like, "Yeah, I'm Maddie," and
Yeah, you dying threw me off.
Whoa! Now
'Cause
wait a
I'm like,
minute.
I think I'm about to talk to this
Now
guy.
in the book, is the mom die?
no, no, the whole
Oh,
backstory.
Maddie is the son, right?
No,
Maddie's
Maddie is
the mom.
Maddie's the
Oh,
mom.
the
Yeah.
mom. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it threw me off.
Yeah.
Spoilers for the book if you haven't read it. Letters to God is about to get torn apart and
So the
ruined
movie
for
was
you.
different than the book, right?
a bit.
A little bit.
Basically, Patrick didn't
I've
exist in
seen
the
the
movie.
movie. I haven't
Right.
read the book.
Yeah, they talk about his dad in the
Yeah.
movie, but they don't. There's where we pick up is Tyler already has cancer, and
Right.
but yeah, the whole backstory there. I basically, when I was writing the story, to kind of separate myself from the story, because initially I was going to do 100% fiction, just to keep my son and my son's story out of it, because it was
Right.
tough. And to kind of separate myself from the story, I kind of killed myself off and made myself the mother.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it threw me off because, I work construction. I'm a carpenter,
oh yeah,
and then I'm like, hey, I'm really relating to this Patrick guy. He's a carpenter. He's expertly handling the coffee mug. And then it's like car crash. He's gone. Forget about him. I'm like, what?
So Maddie was a male character, right?
what's that?
Maddie was a male character.
No.
No, that's
No.
Mom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's
because
fine.
I always viewed
It's
myself.
2020.
Y'all got me
Yeah.
confused.
It's 2020. He can be a.
Me too.
Well, it could be either one, right?
He's 2020. He can be. He can transition. You can't judge him.
Right. But yeah, no, I always considered myself a motherly figure for my
Right.
son, and like I wasn't your typical dad, I guess, but
Now you were married at the time, right?
no,
Oh, okay.
no, I went through a divorce, and which
Oh.
again, why I
But
always
was he
felt,
living with you?
we had joint custody at the time.
Oh, okay.
In the beginning stages, I ended up getting full custody of
Yeah.
him, but yeah.
What made you that initial doctor visit? What made you go right to that thinking? Check his brain.
I honestly,
It sounded like you were confident in that there was something going on.
Yeah, I honestly, it was like everything from start to finish with his sickness to even making the movie. It was all a God thing, in my opinion. I feel like it was that intuition. I felt like God whispering to me, or somebody was whispering to me, this is what's wrong with him. Make sure he gets
Something
checked for it.
strong was telling you that.
Absolutely, it was. And from the time he was diagnosed with it to the day he had the surgery was less than a month. And during that period, that brain tumor had grown from BB size to thumbnail size.
Oh.
So it was a very aggressive tumor. And they said had it not been caught so early, he probably would have been gone within 6 months. Instead, I got 2 extra years out of him, thankfully. But yeah, it was just one of those things. I honestly attributed to my faith. I prayed a lot, and I felt like God was showing me that this is what's wrong with him. This is what needs, the direction you need to take. Because otherwise, had I just listened to the initial pediatrician, being allergies and just gone with that, I think he would have,
Now I haven't mentioned his name, but it's Patrick Tyler Doughtie, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
was he your first child?
He was, yes.
Okay, so you had no other children at this time.
I got to get my timeline straight here. At the time of his diagnosis, I apologize. I did have another one. During this, my then wife, because I was remarried, my then wife was pregnant when he was first diagnosed. And he was so excited. He wanted a baby brother. Couldn't wait. He went with us to the ultrasound to find out if it was a boy or girl. He was just, ecstatic. But he was going through his brain surgery, his radiation, and treatments during all this. And it got to a point where she was placed on bed rest. I was trying to manage my construction business while going to Memphis. And then, so I'm missing out on work, and then she's on bed rest. She can't work, so I've got a wife sitting at home that's pregnant, and then dealing with my son. Well, we finished his last round of chemo, and then they made us wait a bit before we could go home till his counts came back up some. He wasn't fully there, but they let us go anyway because she was on her way to the hospital while we were still in Memphis because she was having contractions and so forth. But we wound up making it before the baby was born, and that's my second son, Brendan, who's now 16, almost 17. But he's kind of been. He's been a lifesaver for me.
Yeah.
He was 18 months old when Tyler passed away.
Right.
but yeah, and then I have another one since then. I've got an 8-year-old right now named Ryan. So
Oh, okay. So you had 3 boys.
3 boys. Yeah.
Um, what was his quality of life? Between the time that he was truly diagnosed and the time he passed away, was it pretty good?
It was. Well, I guess it was better than the alternative, obviously.
Right.
He went through 9 months of treatments, between the surgery, recovery, radiation, and chemo.
Right.
And by the time he was released, I pressured them to give me the word remission, whereas he truly wasn't in remission. He was
Right.
just finished with his treatment. I was just trying to have that faith. But he was in a very weakened state, could hardly walk, very frail, had lost a lot of weight, dark circles around his eyes. But we got home, and over the months, his weight came back a little bit. I mean, he gained a little bit of a weight. And his love for soccer, he couldn't stay away from the soccer field, and that.
So he was
scene in
still
the movie.
playing?
Well, he was dressing out, sitting on the sideline. I coached, and I would let him kind of go in here and there towards the end of the game. And there was this one game, he's like, "Dad, I want to go in, I want to go in, I want to go in." And he kept pressuring me. He wanted to play goalie. And I'm like, so I called all my other teammates around, and I said, "Look, protect him. Don't let anybody near him. Don't let the ball near him."
Mm-hmm.
Because he seriously could hardly stand, much less walk.
Right.
But that scene in the movie, in the book,
That's
where
pretty
he's-
accurate.
it's very accurate.
Yeah.
So it was so he did seize out at the end of the game, like in real life?
He did not have the seizure there. No.
Oh, okay.
His seizures came a little after that.
Okay.
That was added for dramatic effect. A lot of my screenplay, my original screenplay, was kind of changed through pre-production and so forth.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It wasn't Hollywood,
Yeah.
but at least in Hollywood, you kind of know, you're gonna get screwed.
Right.
I don't know if I can say that or not.
Oh,
Yeah.
You can edit that out if you need to. But I'm working with Christians, and I kind of felt like, I let my guard down.
yeah.
And I had a lot of negative, and I've talked to you about some of that. A lot of negative experiences making my movie, but they were trying to get some other writers a name.
Patrick, this was a
yes.
Christian production company,
Yes,
and
it was.
the whole thing, the movie, and the whole thing was.
Yes,
I got
it
you.
was faith-based.
I got you.
Yeah, and that was the intent. My intention was a faith-based movie, and of course I wrote some fiction with it.
Yeah.
The Postman, total fiction.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, I guess when you go through all the grief after losing a child, like you go through these different stages, and one of them is anger. And I wasn't an alcoholic by no means, but the angry side of him, and like he has some of my personality.
And you said you were divorced at the time, right?
Yeah.
So did
well,
that play into your?
I was divorced from Tyler's mom.
Yeah.
And then I'd remarried like 3 years later.
Well, Brady in the book was.
Yes. Good call. Yeah. So that little portion there with Brady and his ex-wife, and that was some of my life there.
Yeah.
I didn't get the DUI,
Well, yeah.
but the mother did.
Oh, okay.
So I took there's a lot of like things that actually happened that are just kind of rewritten throughout the story.
So Brady doesn't exist then, huh?
No, Brady.
It's disappointing because my name's McDaniel. I was like, maybe I'm kin to this dude.
Yeah, no, it was a really cool name though, but
Yeah.
The letters. Okay, now the postman going around delivering letters, that didn't happen, right?
no.
Okay.
And let me tell you that originally when I was writing, seeing, like I said, this was a total God thing, start to
Right,
finish.
right.
God opened every door for me. I'm not a filmmaker. I wasn't a writer. I wasn't a director. But it was one of those things where I continually prayed. I felt like I was continually showed what to do. And that step of faith where, when he opens the door, you walk through it, being obedient.
Right.
And as I walked through it, another door would open and it just continued on. So when I wrote the screenplay, the letters were pretty much meant as a metaphor for his life and how he lived his life and, how selfless he was and always giving. And like he
Right.
thought about everyone else before
Right.
himself.
Right.
And so the letters were pretty much just a metaphor in the beginning. Once I hired one production company, then fired them like 7 months later, and then found David Nixon and his production company. But once I signed a contract with them, I remember having the conversation with them saying, so the letters don't exist? No, they don't. I was...
Patrick, I'm going to represent the unknowing. These are letters that you wrote to your son?
No, for the movie, it's about a little boy with cancer
Right.
that writes letters to God, asking for things for others, basically.
It's
Not-
like prayers written down.
Yes.
Okay.
It was like his prayers on paper.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So after I'd signed the contract with them, and we'd already had this discussion over, there's no letters, on occasion, see now you figure it'd been, 3.5 years by the time we started getting production, a production company and getting things going with the second company. Every now and then I'd go in his bedroom, like it was exactly the same as when he passed. And I'd go in there every now and then and rummage through things, or like, okay, it's time to box up this. So I'd box up a box and put it away. And I happened to be in his room, and I was going through, he had this little rolling like set of drawers that he kept like crayons and markers and all kinds of things. And I was boxing that up, and I came across this little notebook that he had. And I'm flipping through, and I'm just kind of reading some of the things in there. And then I flip over, and it was like, "Dear God." Sorry.
Yeah.
I still get choked up.
Oh, it's okay.
But there was, there was things in there like he was asking for, and there's things in there that, and like he had actually written letters to God. They didn't go get delivered by a postman, but just the fact that it was there, and I didn't know anything about it when I was writing the screenplay. Was one of those things. Another affirmation of, a God thing.
And yet
Yeah,
you were
where-
meant to find it.
I was meant to find it.
Yeah, where it makes you wonder, like, how did God inspire a lot of, what you ended up writing down?
Oh, absolutely, he did.
Well,
And I will tell you, I'll tell you, I went from being this really busy construction guy where like 6-7 days a week I worked, I was nonstop, go, 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 to this, I guess, whipped guy sitting in a hospital room looking at his son every day while he's recovering from brain surgery. And it was one of those moments where I'm just sitting there, you got a lot of time. I gained 30 pounds in his hospital room eating graham crackers and peanut butter. I mean, like, there was nothing for me to do. I'd watch what TV I could watch, or I'd sit and think. But I was just sitting there one day, and the title "Letters to God" popped in my head. And the first thing I thought about was like, man, that's a cool title for a movie.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wrote it down. I kind of chucked it aside. But through all these months, I'm like getting these visions, if you will, I guess, like I'm just writing the story without writing it. And I'm outlining everything, making notes. And once I was done with all that and my son passed away, you're talking 2 years later, I get a job with Metro, and I was working as, my job title was police security guard.
Yeah.
I was looking for a job that was mindless, that I could show up to for 8 hours and go home and didn't have to think, because I just lost my son. But I used that time to start writing. And, I went through my spell where, I was a very devout Christian, and then he passed away, and then I got very angry at God,
Right.
thinking,
You
I
down,
asked you,
down God.
yeah, I mean, I asked, you say ask and you shall receive.
Right,
Where's
right,
my son? So I
right.
got really mad at God.
Right.
I stopped reading the Bible. I stopped going to church. I started, like, anytime I talked to him, it was in anger.
Yeah.
And I started praying, asking God to give me cancer. I said, I want to know what he went through.
Right.
I want cancer. Give me what he had.
Right.
And then, of course, came to my senses. It took me almost a year, but I was still grief-stricken. But once I came to my senses, I got that job with Metro, and I kind of rededicated my life. 9 months after my son passed away, I was diagnosed with leukemia.
Wow.
And it was almost
I
like,
didn't know that.
Here you go.
yeah, and it's almost like you asked, here you are, and one of those stupid things in my life. But I can honestly say that my oncologist told me, if you're going to have cancer, you've got the kind you want. I'm like, whatever that means, but it was a very non-aggressive
That's
leukemia.
an ironic statement.
It is, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a very slow-growing leukemia, and they say most people die with it than from it, although it's generally diagnosed in 60 to 70-year-olds, and I was 40.
All right.
So his goal was to get me to 60.
Yeah.
I got 5 more years, man.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm almost 55 this
Yeah.
month. So,
Wow.
but yeah, so, but when I started writing, like I literally.
Are you in remission now, or?
Yeah, I'm considered in remission, but
Yeah.
it's back. I hit my 5-year mark, and
Oh, it is back.
yeah, it's one that never goes away. So there's no cure for it. They can kind of manage it to a degree, and I'm back on the rise, but it's a slow rise. So,
Yeah.
and whatever God's will, I'm okay with. And
Yeah.
I know I have more years.
That's one thing I really loved about the book. It's sounding to me like, before I say this, it's sounding to me like your original idea whenever you said, I want to, get this story out and tell this story. Was it the movie that came to mind first, or the novel?
The movie.
The movie.
And I did. I wrote the screenplay first.
Oh.
I hate reading, and I know it's really
I hear
weird,
you, man.
but I hate to read. And honestly, up to that point, I think I'd only read 5 or 6 books in my entire life, cover to cover.
Really?
Like I'd start them, and I'd get bored, put them down. I can read articles, newspaper articles, magazine articles, but it doesn't hold my attention. Same thing with writing. I'm sitting there. I started outlining for a book, and I'm looking. I'm like, I got to write 300 or 400 pages. Well, if I do a screenplay, I can write 100. Let's do the screenplay.
Yeah.
So I had to learn.
Where did the book come from?
Well, I started writing that after I wrote the screenplay.
Oh, okay.
It probably made it almost a little easier to write the novel after the screenplay, because you're like, well, I know the story now. I just have to.
Yeah, it did.
Actually, though, the book was more successful than the movie, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Because it made the New York Times bestseller list for like 6 or 7 weeks in a row.
Still counts.
It does. It does. It wasn't number 1, but it was in the top 5. So
That counts.
and the movie itself, I think, it's had success, but not on the financial end in, say, like the box office.
Right.
And that I'm going to just lay it out there and blame the production company on that, because David Nixon, bless his soul, I love him to death, but he brought in some people that didn't have the right frame of mind, and and one of them was a Hollywood type, and thought he knew what was best. And see, with all the other Christian movies, we won't say their names, but the ones we were previously talking about, the way they were marketed prior to release was the distribution company, which is right here in Franklin, Provident Films. They would go to markets and they would invite pastors in, and their price for attendance was to promote the movie within their church
Mhm.
and buy out theater on opening weekend. Our geniuses went out to markets, traveled the country, blew a ton of money, and actually went into entire churches and showed an entire church the movie.
Mhm.
A little backwards. So a month or 2 months later, after you've seen the movie for free at your church, but the movie's released,
It's already
are you going to pay
Yeah.
for it?
Hey, no.
It doesn't matter
Yeah.
how good the
Right.
film
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
it's a
it
done
doesn't-
deal.
Yeah, when you get it free.
I imagine what they were hoping for was just word of mouth.
Yeah.
That was part of it, but I think they totally didn't understand the marketing
Yeah.
concept of what Provident Films was doing, and they were
Okay.
trying. Oh, we know what they did, so we're going to mimic it. But they didn't quite mimic it. They did,
Yeah.
went around. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Showed too many people the movie for free.
yeah.
So whereas they were estimating us doing a 6 to 8 million box office opening weekend, we did 1.2 million,
Yeah.
which isn't bad
Yeah.
for a low budget independent film, but it's not what we're
How much
expecting.
did it cost to produce the film?
The budget for the film was 2.5 million, and then they spent another 6.5 to 7 million marketing, basically traveling around.
So y'all didn't make up the cost of the movie then?
No, well, then there's the creative accounting that comes into effect.
Right.
Because once it left the theaters, and it was in theaters for 16 weeks, which is an extremely long run for a low budget independent film that's
Right.
not making a whole lot of money.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But people
right.
kept seeing it, and for
Right.
some reason it was in the box offices for 16 weeks, and then it came out on DVD, and the DVD sales did really well, and then it went overseas. It's been in multiple markets internationally,
Yeah.
and every time there was a new release, I always kind of knew.
Yeah.
They didn't tell me about it. I would know because I'd start getting Facebook requests from people
Right.
from that country. So
Right, right, right.
Did it break through to the non-Christian market, to general?
yeah, it was shown in 1,100 theaters nationwide. So it was out there. It wasn't just sold for the Christian base.
Right.
It was meant for non-Christians to see because obviously, I mean, like there's a message of hope,
Right.
and trying to relay that message.
And that response
Outside.
was good.
The response was very good. Now, of course, there's some non-Christians that bash the film. It was hokey. It was over
Yeah.
the top. It was this. It was that. But generally speaking, the reception of it was very good.
How
And
was the
I
response from the faith-based? How were they?
It was excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, they loved it. I got hundreds and hundreds of emails and Facebook messages and so forth of people that, after seeing the film, like one young lady, teenager, walked away. She was made to go to church by her parents. Walked away from the church as soon as she came of age, and at the begging of her mom, went and saw the movie with her, and she said, "I haven't been in church in years, and because of this, I want to thank you for making the film. Thank Tyler for all he went through. But I'm now back in church. I believe in God. And I'll never leave the church again." And I got messages like that
Yeah.
over and over.
Well, good.
So
It was kind of like you said, really, the real issue was the production and how it was marketed.
yes,
Yeah.
that was the issue. So
Before we leave, what you were talking about leukemia, you reminded me of what I went through. Like, I got a kidney stone, and never had a kidney stone in my life.
Almost the same
Okay.
thing.
I got one of those 2 years ago.
Well, and it's like having a baby. I've heard.
Right.
Well, he was with me that
Oh,
night,
yeah.
'cause, and he can tell you how much pain I was in. Okay, and we went to the hospital, and Stone's Crest, and it looked like they were walking along with dead lights falling off of them.
Yeah, I fell asleep.
And so I told him, I said, let's go to Vanderbilt. So we went to Vanderbilt. Of course, it's the same thing there. And I prayed. I was sitting there, and
I thought we started in Stonecrest and Smyrna, and then
We did.
Did we go to Vanderbilt?
Yeah,
after that?
we went from there to Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't remember much.
And
from
that-
it. I
that
remember
was
falling
prob-
asleep in the hallway reading one of your books.
Oh, really?
No, that Glenn Beck book.
Yeah, but that may have been God because the way it all turned out, me going to
Right.
Vanderbilt, because we got there and I was sitting in the waiting room and it was like, please come get me back there, and I just prayed. I said, Lord, please. I said, take this pain, and it was almost like boom, immediately, it went
Really?
away. Yeah, it was the craziest thing I ever.
Lucky.
Yeah. And the only thing I can figure, I must have passed it. I must have passed
You're
it.
asking
Didn't
for the wrong
realize it,
things,
but
Patrick. That's the
Right?
problem.
Darn it.
Asking you shall receive. He asked for the lack of pain.
Take my
you
pain
lost
away.
it.
Boom. Give me cancer. Okay.
no.
Whatever he's saying, man.
No, but
Darn it.
But no, what I'm saying, if it hadn't been for that kidney stone, I would have found out I had cancer.
Oh, wow.
Because when they took me back there, the doctor came up, and by this time I was not hurting, and he said, well, we're gonna do a CT scan just to see if that's the only thing going on,
Oh.
So he took me back and did a CT scan and come back, and I'm laying there in the hallway, and we'd already been there 3 or 4 hours. I'm ready to go home,
Right.
And it was so crowded at Vanderbilt, I'm laying there on a gurney out in the middle of the hallway, and he comes up and just real nonchalantly he says, well, it looks like you did have a kidney stone. It looks like you probably passed it,
Already.
But yeah. But he says, but you got a mass on your kidney, and you might want to check that out, So I set up an appointment, and and a few days later, my urologist he made me take another CT scan, and he comes back and he said, you got a cancer. He said, he said I'd be willing to bet 60-80% that it's cancer,
Oh, Lord.
So anyway, they did more tests, and the options he gave me was I could either leave it there and see if it grows more, or I could
That sounds like a
Yeah.
good choice.
or I could do a partial removal of the kidney, or I could have the kidney removed. But he said I wouldn't suggest a partial because I get it all, and he said plus you might bleed to death on the table,
Oh, Lord.
So anyway, I had to, I told him, all right, give me option 3, just remove the thing, And so that's what they did. Well, everything went great. It was very painful surgery and all that, but it come back, it was cancer. But like, you kind of remind me what you were talking about. He said, if this is, his exact words, he said, if you're going to have cancer, this is the right one to have. He said, it's
How could 2 different doctors say 2 different cancers are the right one to have?
right. Like, maybe they rehearsed this.
Right.
They teach that
But
day one.
But he
Yeah.
but he
in
said
medical
it was the slowest growing kind of cancer, and it was the least likely to return.
Oh, well, that's good news.
Yeah,
So you're in
so-
remission.
And
No
I,
return.
Well, I didn't have to have chemo or anything.
Oh,
yeah.
that's even better.
Yeah, because when they got rid of the kidney, it was all confined in the kidney.
Oh, nice.
So, but anyway, it just reminded me what you were talking about there. 'Cause he
Right.
pretty much said the same
Yeah.
thing,
That's
Yeah.
funny. That's
But
not funny, but
But let's see.
Well, before we go anywhere, okay, so I like what you said a little bit ago. It's like that will be done when you were talking about the return of your leukemia.
right.
I felt like that was kind of the bigger message buried beneath a lot of the movie, and mostly I felt in the book is basically where I want to say Maddie's having that moment of like,
Yep.
God, you're reckless, like Job, and then God says, well, dude, you weren't there when I formed the earth, man.
Right.
You don't know nothing.
Yep.
And it kind of plays out in real life where it's like I explain, or I like to think of it like this. Worst thing that ever happened in the history of mankind is God himself died on a cross here on earth in front of us.
Right.
Worst thing that ever happened, worst thing that's ever going to happen. But at the same time, that's the best thing that ever happened because that's where he bought us. That's
Right.
where death was defeated.
Yep.
So it's the worst thing that ever happened, but at the same time, it's the best thing that ever happened.
Right.
So I think a lot of the terrible, terrible, tragic things that happen to us here on earth are really, really good things through the providence of God.
Yep.
We just don't understand how great they are because we don't see it from his perspective.
Right.
And that's kind of what I, felt like I was reading, or I was actually, on the audibles. I felt like that's what I was, the book was saying was like, this terrible thing's happening, but look what Tyler was able to, look what happened through Tyler.
Right.
At the end of the book, where the mail's all getting poured out and all this kind of stuff, and the tears are falling.
And this is
and it plays out in real life where, you put this book out, and you put this movie out, and all of a sudden you're getting all these stories about like, look, I got saved, I went back to church,
Absolutely.
I abandoned my faith, but because of this movie, I came back, and it's just like this terrible, terrible thing you would never want to see happens.
Right.
But through the providence of God, it was so amazing and it was so great. And on the plus side, Tyler's more alive than us today, right?
Absolutely. And he was one that I always knew from a very early stage in that kid's life. I mean, like infancy, that there's something very special about this kid. Now, we all like to think that about our kids anyway.
Right,
And
right.
my other
Right.
kids are special,
right.
but I never even thought this about them. There was something different about him, something very special. And as he was going through his young life, he had such a wisdom about him that I'd never seen in anybody his age, just to throw this out there because it's one of my favorite things. He was 3 years old. It was right after his mom and I divorced. And we were in my truck. I was on my way to Home Depot, drinking my coffee, getting some nails or whatever I had to get before, work. And I'd always take him with me because they had free donuts there. And then I'd drop him off at daycare. And we're driving, and I'm listening to the radio, and I'm drinking coffee. And I hear, "I picked you." And I stopped, and I looked at him. I said, "You picked me? What do you mean?" He said, "When I was in heaven, I picked you for my dad." And that, it's always stuck with me. And I honestly, like I was asking, I can remember when his mom was pregnant with him, I was like, wouldn't it be cool if, there's all these little souls laying on clouds in heaven looking down going, I want that as my parent,
Yeah.
And then here he is telling me this. And I was like, it was just really weird. But as upset and grief stricken as I was after he passed, in that short period of my grieving, which I still grieve today, don't get me wrong, but in my rebellion from God, and what brought me back was I was thinking to myself, it's like, there's a story here. There's something much bigger than me and much bigger than my son. And developing, because I'd already had the story in mind, I hadn't written it yet, but getting the story out there, and it's like I told all these production companies when I met with them, it's like, don't get me wrong, I'm open to making money, but that's the last thing on my mind. I'm not doing this for the money, I'm doing it for the message. There's a story that I want to get out. And just getting all the emails and the great reception, there was somebody that got saved at his funeral.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they were so touched by everything that was going on. And our church was like standing room only, people
Right.
out the door, people we didn't even know, had never met Tyler before, but had heard about us on the news, whether it be the newspaper or television, and just word got around. And it was just like, I don't know, he was meant for bigger things, and I think his purpose was that story, giving me that story. And I feel like that was my purpose, was telling his story.
Well, in my life, of course, you were talking about being angry at God and everything. I don't know. I think it was my mom instilled this in me. I don't know who it was, but my parents passed when I was 12 years old, and all of a sudden I'm an orphan, you know.
Right.
And I never have ever accused God. I've never been mad at God. I've
Right.
never, and maybe I get that from her. I don't know, and I always see the good in everything. Like, you know,
That's a good thing.
you know, my parents' death. Because I think of my life before my parents died, I was a spoiled brat, you know.
Right.
And after your parents die, and you go from being an upper middle class kid getting everything you want to being a lower middle class guy, you know, being raised by a woman who's raised her own two kids,
Oh, yeah.
and she's single, she's a divorcee, and me and my brother. Uh, it was a rough period right there, you know, because I was 12, and you know, until I met my wife and married her, you know, my life was kind of chaotic, you know.
Right.
But she has always, I mean, my family, my grandkids, my kids, it's like God has paid me back tenfold,
Right.
you know.
Oh yeah.
And we have people. You were talking about special. We have people in my family. I've got my grandson Russell, which you probably seen on Facebook. You know, plays ball and all kinds of sports. And
Right.
I mean, you talk about a special kid. I mean, this kid is, and you know, they wanted doctors wanted to abort him before he was born because of spina bifida.
Right.
I've got 3 grandchildren today that if we'd listened to a doctor, they wouldn't be here. You know, and
Thank God you didn't.
and all of them are so special, and especially Russell because he's such an inspiration to everybody. You know,
Right.
he's crippled, but he.
So that's
I mean,
phenomenal.
people are just drawn to him. You know,
Right.
and there are special people out there.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
And it's
absolutely.
meant for them to be here.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree. Totally.
You know,
agree.
no matter how long they were here, you know.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons I object to abortion so much.
Oh yeah.
But I want to address one thing. We'll probably need to get toward the conclusion here pretty soon. But I noticed the last time I talked to you a while back, you were talking about maybe doing a movie on bullying.
Yes.
How's that going?
Well, we had some setbacks on that. We'd raised some money, and a year ago, this past summer, we were going to shoot it.
Right.
But we had some conflicts with some of the actors we had hired, and it came down to we were 2 weeks away from being in production, and had a 30-day window to shoot it, and realized it wasn't going to work. So
Right.
obviously we had to give all the money back, and then we have not raised the money again since then. It's kind of been put on hold. Need the money.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I noticed that. I saw you still have a Facebook page up for it.
Yeah.
And, at one point, you were even doing casting,
Right.
or, you know, I guess casting calls.
Yep.
If you want to call a Facebook post that.
Yeah.
Well,
No, we did, and
okay.
we hired. In fact, we had a fantastic cast that we'd hired.
Really?
Yep. Had everybody lined up, and then there were scheduling conflicts. One of the kids that was going to play the main kid, he couldn't be there for, I think it was like 11 days, and then the actor, and it was a known name, that was going to play the father, there were like 7 days he couldn't be there, but the 11 and the 7 weren't overlapping at all. They were, so 18 days of our 30 were gone, and there was, I think, only 2 scenes the dad was going to appear in that didn't have the son with him.
Really?
So between that, and then one of our cameramen came up and said, "Oh, I can't," so it was like it kind of felt like rather than rushing and rehiring new cast and getting another cameraman, let's just put it on hold. And that was coming up on 2 years now. So dream's still there.
Reason I was asking about why you chose that name or title for a movie is I know in the I watched the movie Letters to God, and I know there was a scene in there where Tyler got bullied at school. Did that actually happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, like that happens every day anyway. But yeah, actually,
And I didn't know if
he was bullied.
that inspired you to write this.
Well, actually, this one, it was the co-writer of this came to me with an idea. He had a 7-page short story,
Right.
and which was The Bullies Beware. And I read it, and I'm like, holy dude, this is a full-length feature film. He goes, yeah, I just don't know how to get it there. Or, do you want to help? And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
it didn't take us long to whip that thing out, but it's a really solid script. It's funny. It's lighthearted, even though it deals with bullying. But there's a message in that, and it's one of those where it's a treat others how you'd like to be treated type message without the in your face,
Yeah.
Now, are
typical
you
Christian.
are you doing it
Yes.
from the eyes of one central character, or are you doing like other numerous stories of or incidents of bullying?
A single story.
A single story, okay.
But there's multiple facets to it.
Yeah.
You've got the main character and then the bullies, and it's pretty much bringing a lot of the bullying, a lot of different things. In fact, things that don't even happen today, but that
Right.
happened when you and I were in school.
Right.
The wedgies and
Yeah,
a lot of the old-fashioned type
Yeah,
bullying that
yeah.
really doesn't happen much anymore. Now
Right,
it's just
right.
like a Facebook post or a
Right.
Twitter post or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Social media, but it's a lot of the old-fashioned bullying that's in there. The name calling, the typical stuff. But it follows them through, and it's about this group of wimps basically that get tired of being bullied and kind of form a group called the Bully Beware Club, and they formulate a plan to kind of get back at the bullies anonymously, but it
okay.
kind of gets out of hand. So, but it's a fun take on.
Well, I can relate
bullying,
to that because I was bullied for years, and because I was always a coward, and but
I don't believe that. Do you?
well, no, really, I was. And,
Military man, I don't know.
well, I
Right.
mean, not
He's scared,
now.
He's
I-
scared
I-
of flying, and he was in the Air
Oh,
Force.
you-
You gotta have some kind of. He's gotta have some kind
Now
of.
you
risk.
Scared of
bully-
flying? Let's join the Air
Yeah.
Force.
He's
Now
like,
you bully
he's
me
like, oh,
today.
dude, you should do a 38 special now.
Now you bully me today, and that makes me that much more determined to get back at you.
Oh, right.
But, or get even. But anyway, now of course my day of reckoning happened when I was about 13, 14 years old. I got tired of it and just laid the dude out.
Good for you. That's what
And-
it takes.
Yeah.
So
My son,
Yeah.
my 16-year-old, just got in a fight
Right.
back in the fall. I think, did I tell you about that? And he'd been called all kinds of names,
Right.
been picked on for months by this little scrawny kid. I don't know why.
Right.
And not, my kid's not big anyway. He's
Right.
he's maybe just shy of 6 feet,
Right.
but he's skinny. But he swims on the swim team. And this kid picked this one day due to something somebody told him that my son had said, which was a lie. So he picked this day and went through the entire day trying to get my son to fight him. My son's like, I'm not going to fight you. I was like, dude, I got
Yeah.
better things to do,
Yeah.
And the kid found out he had swim practice at another school that afternoon, found out what time it was, and
Right.
showed up with 3 carloads of kids.
Yeah.
And I guess they were just there to watch, quote unquote.
Uh-huh.
But my son ended up getting the best of him.
Right.
So I was like, and he's not been bullied by that kid since. So
And, but the thing I try to teach people is that through my experience, that even to this day at 70 years old, I'm still ashamed of those times that I let people bully me.
Sure,
I
sure.
still think about that. Okay.
Yeah.
But the times that I've stood up since,
Right.
I'm very proud of those moments.
Absolutely.
And that's what this thing about self-esteem and all. You got to earn self-esteem. I
Right.
mean, that's something you get through confidence of.
Absolutely.
but saying to yourself, I'm not going to be treated that way.
Exactly.
You know,
And nobody deserves to be
Yeah.
treated like that. So
and that's what is enraging me right now with this COVID-19 thing.
sure.
We've got all these bullies out there that
Yes.
are making these people do all these stupid rules,
Right.
and it angers me because I feel like as a nation we're being bullied.
Absolutely we are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
And
Greg,
I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm a no masker.
Yeah.
You will not catch a mask on me.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
And I get the looks.
Yeah.
And I'm the guy that goes down the wrong aisle at Walmart.
Yeah.
Pretty much skip down it.
Yeah.
And dare anybody
Yeah.
say something to me.
It's like, try
Well,
me.
Yeah.
I feel a sneeze coming on. Try me.
but
Well,
Greg, remember, we always have a safe space for you next door. a safe haven. There's a safe haven room for
Hey, you get bullied now. You call me.
He's 70 now. He's
No,
got to hide
but
from everyone.
I do wear the mask, and I admit it.
Hey, you're
but,
70. There's nothing wrong with that. Just
No,
mask it and be proud.
But
Here's the thing that gets me is the people wear the mask, but they won't cover their nose.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
redundant,
Sure.
ain't it?
Oh yeah, that
I was
drives
at
me
Thornton's
nuts.
today. Some
Yeah.
lady, like the cashier, she's got her mask
Yeah.
over her mouth
Yeah,
and not the
what's
nose.
the,
It's like,
what's the point?
all
Yeah.
right, fair enough.
But I felt about this tall. I was walking back to my car after I got gas, and there's this old guy about my age standing there. He says Air Force. I said yeah. He said Careerman Air Force. I said yeah. He said put her there. And I said, oh, well, maybe the elbow. And this dude didn't, he didn't have a mask or anything. He said, I'm a Vietnam combat veteran, from Marine Corps. He
That
said,
might have COVID.
he said, you ain't scared, are you?
He's spitting
And
all
I
over
thought-
you.
I thought,
He
man,
says,
this dude.
I've killed 20 million. You
Yeah.
want to be 21? Put her there.
This dude made me feel about that tall,
Oh yeah. I'm not falling for that.
All right, I want to get kind of toward the end here. Now I want to change directions because, going to the some law enforcement questions.
Sure.
I know you're a big Second Amendment guy, and I am too, and I'm sure he is too. I know we talked in the past about how we can protect schools and stuff, and I mentioned arming teachers, and you
Sure.
said you weren't in favor of that. Are you still pretty much believing that? or-
Yeah, I'm not in favor of that, and I'll tell you why. There might be several circumstances where it might be okay,
Right.
but here's the thing. Have you met some of these teachers?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I was a substitute teacher for a year in Rutherford County, and I went to a whole lot of school. I think I hit every school in Rutherford County, and it didn't take me but a year to realize I don't want to do that no more.
Right.
You know?
and that I was
mean,
trying to be funny.
I know what you're
That was
saying.
no offense to the teachers because I
Right.
work with them and
Right.
I respect a lot of them.
Right.
But on a real life basis, let's just say that puts another gun in the school,
Right.
right? And I will tell you this: this school year has been the absolute worst school year that I've witnessed for behavior with students. We continually have more and more every year, and part of the reason is this RTIB thing.
What's that?
The B stands for behavior.
Uh-huh.
They have RTI. I forgot what the initials stand for, but RTI for math, RTI for English. It's like extra help
Right.
for somebody that's struggling in math.
Right.
Well, they've introduced this behavioral plan, and apparently it's a plan was developed by Vanderbilt,
Right.
and it takes a couple of years to implement, but it's taken a lot. It's tying the hands of administrators and teachers. And these kids, the students, are realizing this, that they're not going to get in trouble. There's no consequences. So the behavior just keeps getting
Worse.
worse and worse. The only times right now that they can be suspended on site is drug related or something for violence. And they can be suspended. Otherwise, there's this whole process that they have to go through. The teacher has to stop teaching, get a form out, and fill out a referral for the student telling administration what the student did. And then has to send that up to the office. Administrators look at it, and then they determine whether or not they need to call the student down. There's so many of those before there's a call home to the parent. So many call homes to the parent before there's an in-school suspension or an out-of-school suspension. And so it's pretty much, it's a joke. These students are realizing it. So back to the gun thing. So if you have your behavior students, which there's some that were, just as bad prior to this, and a teacher with a gun in the classroom, whether it be locked up in a drawer, which would do no good anyway, correct? I mean, in my opinion, if you're going to carry a gun, it should be on you.
On you, right?
Absolutely.
It's the
the only
safest
way you're
place,
gonna-
right?
Absolutely. Well, some of these students, and I'm talking fifth graders, there's some of these students that are adult size, childlike mind. But let's take anybody from fifth grade on of size, character, mental issues, whatever it is, and you put a gun on a teacher in a classroom with these students, the ability, I think, increases for having the school violence because that weapon is right there. So you've got a full-grown man basically fighting a woman teacher for a gun, and now you've got more probability of shooting in a
How
school.
many like me? Okay, although I was a substitute teacher, I was there. I mean, a school shooter comes in, he don't care whether you're a substitute teacher or a regular teacher.
Absolutely. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or just visiting the school.
You're just a target, target-rich environment.
Right.
But somebody like me's got 21 years military police experience, well trained. The government spent thousands of dollars training me, law enforcement, rules of engagement, and all that. Should not there be a program for somebody like me?
I think that would be an excellent program to have.
Yeah.
I believe there is, isn't there?
I believe they've talked about it. I don't know if there's one implemented. I know there were some veterans who volunteered
Oh, okay.
and were volunteering at schools. But see, you've got to go through this whole. I mean, there's a whole process. I mean, they're going to want you trained, carrying a permit. They're going to want to have their own training.
Well, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, and
Yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a great idea because it's going to employ a lot of these veterans that are
Right.
possibly
That's
out of
what I'm
work.
talking about. When I think of
Absolutely.
teachers going armed, I have to believe that in schools we've got a lot of combat veterans.
Yes.
We've got people with like me that
Absolutely.
have a lot of experience that would be an asset.
I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah.
The great thing, or not so great for a veteran, I guess, the great thing about Rutherford County is
Yeah.
that we have the school resource officer program at the sheriff's office. So there's an officer at every school, which is fantastic. High schools, there's 2. But there are so many counties outside of Rutherford County that do not have an SRO program
Right.
that could use or benefit from something, say,
Right.
of such. They could
And-
train
and-
them at a police department. They could train them at
Yeah.
a sheriff's office. They could have their own instructors.
And I don't
for
think
how
it
to
ought
do
to be open carry. I think it ought to be concealed carry. I don't think teacher. I mean, it's just like me. I never carry open.
Right.
I think it's stupid.
It is stupid. I
Yeah.
agree.
Hey.
Uh,
No, I was just.
oh,
I just thought it was funny you said it. Because he's told me that my whole life. That's part of the reason I think I conceal, because I don't know. I guess he influenced me.
yeah, absolutely, and that's a great influence. I was getting off work one night, off of a second shift, and I had to stop by Kroger to pick up something. And I walked in, and I went up one aisle, and I was coming down a second, and I see this guy walk past the aisle. He's got cowboy boots on. He's got a pistol on his side, ball cap, And I'm like, oh my gosh. And, you know, of course, I'm on alert because he's
Yeah,
carrying, but
yeah.
I'm not threatened because
Right, right,
if he was a bad guy, he'd be masked or, you know,
Right,
he
right.
would be concealed.
right, right.
Huh?
Yeah, oh
Concealed.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm shaking my head at him. I go down another aisle, and here he comes up the aisle. Now I'm in uniform. I just got off
Yeah.
work. I say, hey, bud. He said, yeah. I said, do you have a permit? And he goes, of course I do. And I go, perfect. I said, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, open carrying. I said, do you realize you are a target? I'm a target right now because I'm in uniform.
Yeah,
I said, you're my only backup. You're my closest backup. If a bad guy comes in here and shoots and kills me, who do you think he's turning to next?
Right, right.
Me? Absolutely. Now, you just did no bit of good.
Right.
You lost your element of surprise.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and
that's-
on
yeah.
top of that, even you as a police officer, you have to secure your weapon all the time.
All the time.
I mean, you got to be conscious of somebody walking up behind you or whatever.
Absolutely.
And the same way with a guy carrying open, you got to worry about somebody grabbing your gun. you know?
Absolutely.
And it's just stupid to me.
It-
and
it is.
and on top of that, you got some bleeding heart out here that hates guns, and they see a gun and they
Right.
freak out.
Yes,
you
they
know,
do.
And you
Yeah.
bring attention to yourself.
Yep. Every
You
time.
know?
And there's no sense in that unwanted attention to begin with. And then,
Right.
like I said, you're losing your element of surprise
Right.
in a situation.
I always
So-
notice dudes who open carry. They always got their arm right there.
Oh,
It
right.
looks very uncomfortable.
well, I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you.
For the listeners, I got my arm where my pistol would be
Right.
if I was open carrying.
Yeah.
But it's like you gotta sit your arm right there because you're paranoid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you notice that a lot.
Yeah, and you know they're paranoid because otherwise they wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and the thing is, and I've noticed myself doing a very similar thing too, but we're taught, as cops, we're taught to look for concealed weapons, and a key giveaway is that constant touching. Somebody like using their elbow or their arm to touch that side. It's to make sure
Yeah.
that the gun's still there, and it's
I do that a lot.
everybody does it, and it's been proven.
Yeah.
Cops,
Yeah.
whoever carries a weapon,
Right.
they're constantly checking to make sure that weapon is there,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
one of the things that we're looking for
Right.
in a crowd or of people, or if we're suspecting somebody to be armed. If they're constantly touching right there, they probably got a
Dude,
gun.
I left mine at home one day and I just checked it out of habit,
Yeah.
and my face turned white. I'm like, where'd I put it?
I'm not. man.
I do that too. I'm in a grocery store off duty. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't bring my gun.
No, I like my mind because it was safe at home, right?
Yeah.
My mind went straight to like, it's somewhere, like it's
Oh, somewhere
anywhere
else?
else.
Oh.
It's in Afghanistan. It's about to kill
Well,
somebody.
I don't know. I don't know about you, but I carry my gun everywhere, pretty much everywhere I go. I mean, I'm not stupid. I ain't gonna carry it in a school
Right.
or courthouse or whatever. But if I reach down sometimes and I forgot and left my gun at home, I feel like I'm naked.
I do the same, and I will say, like I've gone more times lately than not without
Right.
my gun,
Right.
and it's more. I don't know if I'm feeling more relaxed in my old age. I don't know what it is, but my wife has even commented on it
Yeah.
about notice you're not carrying your gun as much as you used to, and it's like I
Yeah.
either A, forgot it,
Yeah.
senility is
Yeah. Yeah.
a B, but. Or it's just like I feel like I'm just running up to Dollar General.
Yeah.
And there's been times I've been up to Dollar General and I wish I had my
I
gun.
wish you had your gun.
I
yeah.
got in a confrontation with a guy and I went like this. I'm like, stay back. Like I still had it. And for you that can't see that, I kept my hand on where my pistol would be and turned to the side like I had it. So
Did he believe you?
he did. He stopped, he backed up, and he got in his car and he
Yeah.
left. So
Well, yeah, you don't get to choose when someone's going to kill you, I guess.
no, you really don't.
Yeah.
And that can be just as big of a surprise as a doctor telling you have cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been there and done that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, I guess. And y'all got anything else? One thing I did want to ask you. Okay, do you believe that we should. If you're not crazy about it, having all the teachers, or I'm not saying all need to be armed anyway, but I'm saying more teachers armed. What about hire more SROs and also putting metal detectors in schools?
I'm a huge supporter of metal detectors.
Yeah,
That right there can eliminate a lot of issues,
Right.
especially if you already have a cop in your school
right.
who can't be everywhere. An alert from a metal detector, even if that's where you're posted the first thing in the morning, is next to the metal detector,
Right.
so you can catch anything coming in.
Right.
But at least to where it would alert somebody, say, "Hey, metal detector went off on that kid right there with the blue hoodie
Right.
and the
right.
red backpack." You know, I huge supporter of that. We were talking, and it's something that we've discussed within Rutherford County for our schools as well. The cost that goes along with having those is astronomical. But if you want to do you want to put a price on a child's head?
So that's what irritates me.
Me
is
too.
That you got all these school shootings, okay, and I went to Washington the last summer on vacation. Every single government building I
Yep.
walked into, I
Metal
had to go
detector.
through a metal detector.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, that's their lives.
And here's
Exactly.
the deal. And here's the deal. These kids are way more valuable to me than them.
You're darn right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You're darn right.
And if that's your kid, how it doesn't matter to you who the president of the United States is or who the
Right.
Speaker of the House is.
Right.
When your kid has been wounded or killed,
Absolutely.
that's the center of your life right
Yep.
there.
Even
you
if
know?
they just started out by placing them in all the high schools,
Right.
because that tends to be the most,
Right.
I guess, the largest target. There have been other schools like elementary,
Right.
Sandy Hook, all that good stuff that have been targeted. But start off, if the cost is the issue, start off with high schools and then move it down to middle schools, then elementary schools. But I definitely think it's something that needs to be in every school.
Yeah.
And back to what you said about the teachers, I've had discussions with other SROs about it would, if we were going to do teachers with guns in schools, I would feel better personally.
Having a metal detector.
Well, with a metal detector,
Yeah.
but I would feel more comfortable having designated teachers,
Right.
not a free
Well,
for all.
that's what I'm looking at.
Right.
I mean, like you said, if it's a woman that's 5'5" and she's done nothing but teach all her life and has no.
Right.
I mean, if she's a military veteran or a former police officer
Sure.
or something like that, yeah. you
Yeah.
know.
Well, that's why I asked you earlier if they already had something in place like that, because I had a teacher, I want to say in the 5th grade, he was active military,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm pretty sure, he carried at the school, and I was pretty sure he had permission to do it. I could have been wrong. I could be wrong.
Well,
It was 5th grade. 5th graders believe stupid things, but
back then I would say no. 5th grade for you?
wait, maybe it was 7th grade. My bad.
Because I'll tell you, even when I was working at Metro, which you're talking, I worked there from '05 to 2012, and during that time, like I wasn't even allowed to bring, even working for a law enforcement agency, I wasn't allowed to bring my weapon on school grounds. So I do know now you're allowed to keep it in your car, if
Oh.
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But as far as like carrying in the building, it's still illegal. Like
Yeah. But
there's
like I
security
said,
guards that'll come in my school and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to have that in here."
Yeah.
Which I'm not threatened by them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That again, that's my backup.
Right. Yeah.
But just so no one else reports them.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm okay with a select
Right. Right.
select
right.
group carrying them. And definitely, like you said, that I think a veteran program would be awesome,
yeah.
especially for smaller counties that can't afford
and
to
they
have
also ought
SROs.
to have volunteer programs.
Oh
like,
yeah, and that's
like a guy like me, if I don't have anything to do on a particular day, I
Right.
volunteer to come down and watch the outside of the school, or,
Right.
something like that.
yeah.
know. So, Y'all
What
got
is the?
anything else?
Yeah,
Go
just I'm
ahead.
curious about what is the cost on those metal detectors? You have any idea what the numbers were?
Honestly, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I want to say they were. Well, I know they were tens of thousands, but it was going to cost in the millions for.
You want to look it up on Amazon?
I'm gonna look. I'm gonna look up real quick while we're sitting here. Metal detectors. But there were specific ones.
What about a wanding system? Is that
See, now we do have wands,
okay?
but the only problem with that is that it's difficult for me as being one person to stand there
And
Yeah.
get everybody in.
Well, yeah,
yeah,
like
'cause-
Blackman over here alone is, what, almost 3,000, 2,000?
it's 2,500 kids or something like that. I mean, I have over 1,100 at my elementary school,
Right.
and they're adding on to it, which is going to add another 400 to 500 students, and it's nearly impossible for me to stand there and
wand
wand 'em.
everybody.
Yeah. Let's see. I can't even find one on here, but I do know that they were like tens of thousands of dollars per school,
Yeah.
so it would cost in the millions for
And that's the primary driving reason for not
cost.
cost wise.
Yeah.
They don't talk about do they get into stigma and stuff like that? Like you're classifying the school as being a bad school and that type of
I don't think that I don't think that would be an issue.
Okay.
Honestly, it might be a concern of some. As far as like,
I mean, and the parents, how they're going to react to it, and, all of
really, yeah. Well, me personally, I'm a cop and a parent. I would welcome it, and it would give me a little more sense of security that my child's safe entering that school. Because I'm not an SRO at my kid's school. They go off to 2 other different schools. I have no control over their safety. I'd love to be their SRO. That way, at least I would feel,
Well,
like
you
I
don't
had
get that choice.
Yeah, I don't get that
yeah.
choice. But I don't get the opportunity to protect my own kids.
How often do
So-
they drill for active shooter in the schools?
For SROs or for the schools
school.
themselves?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, we have 1 code red drill a year and 1 code yellow drill a year. The code red drills generally are scenario based, and sometimes they're very extensive and last 30, 45 minutes to an hour long. And other times they're 15, 20, 25 minutes. But
That's annually.
it's annually. Yep, every school year. Yeah, so it's kind of like when we call code red, it's a natural thing for the kids. They all know, every last one of them know what to do. And then there's options, obviously, depending on what's going on. That's a full lockdown.
And they run those through K through 12?
Yes, every year.
I got a question too. And this I know this is such a politically charged issue. Why the schools won't get into. There was a time in America where kids they had rifle clubs, and they
Oh, yeah.
they pushed gun safety and all this type of thing. It irritates me that because of politics and everything, anytime a school shooting, the first thing they go to is gun control.
Absolutely.
Which gun control is nothing but gaining power. That's all it is.
That's exactly
okay?
right.
You take like this bump stop issue
Yeah, right.
with the guy in Las Vegas. This guy was a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
Okay. How does banning bump stock, how would it have prevented that? It wouldn't, because
It
he's a
wouldn't.
millionaire. He can get them anywhere he wants to.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm
They
saying?
could get whatever he wanted
Yeah,
to.
but they had to pass something to make everybody feel a little bit better.
Right.
You
And I think it was more to let the left feel a little bit better
absolutely.
about gaining a little bit of control over
Yeah.
anything having to do with weapons.
Yeah. It's just an incremental thing.
Absolutely.
But you were talking about a while ago. We were talking about feeling for your weapon and finding out it was missing and all that. But he can attest to this. That I've always, my grandkids, I've always taken my gun out, emptied it, put it on a table. I say, okay, what do you do if you find one of these? And they'll say, at first they didn't know what to say.
Right.
But I teach them, don't touch it. Go get an adult. The things that you would tell them. Okay,
That's
For
exactly right.
safety. Right.
Yep.
And I know it works because I was sitting in my easy chair one day, and my grandson Zane, his good buddy, he was small, and I'm getting ahead of myself. My wife comes to me, and she said, "You missing something?" And I says, "Oh
Oops.
crap!" Guy had on these loose fitting shorts,
Yeah.
and I'd been out doing some yard work and everything. I said, "Oh crap! Where'd you find it?" And he said, "Well, your grandson Zane came to me and said there's a gun in the recliner."
Good boy.
But it showed me this works,
Yeah.
And I'm thinking they ought to, they'll allow people to come into the school and teach them CPR, teach them stop, drop, and roll. How to keep them burning up, or what to do in a tornado, what to do in this, to do that. But they won't let somebody from NRA come in and do a class on gun safety.
Can I make you feel a little bit better?
What's that?
Well, I tell you, right here in Rutherford County,
Uh-huh.
in every elementary school, we have a gun safety program called Eddie Eagle,
Oh, good. Yeah.
which is sponsored by
The NRA.
NRA. We have a little cartoon
Yeah.
book and a video. It's
Well,
about
I did not know they did
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm not saying they do this everywhere.
Right.
We seek out different curriculum to
Right.
teach, and gun safety is one of them.
Right.
Because we're obviously believers in teaching gun safety,
Right.
and it is exactly like you said. It's stop, don't touch. There's
Yeah.
a song that goes with it too.
Oh, no.
Run away,
Yeah.
call a grown up.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Rutherford County, we do teach that.
Oh, good.
I wish it was nationwide.
Yeah,
I
it
don't.
needs to
I,
be.
I know it's
Isn't it?
not.
Yeah.
Rutherford County, they seem a lot cooler. Like when I was in school, Rutherford County was pretty cool with a lot of more conservative leaning, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for?
Organizations?
No, I guess methods. I'm looking for
Yeah.
like a word like methods.
No, I totally agree.
But like
Now-
for instance, we had a Bible class in our school.
Oh,
we
that's
had,
awesome.
My government teacher was a right-leaning person.
That's awesome.
So it's like, and I hear a lot of people complain about the school system, and
Sure.
I've always told him, like, I don't remember a lot of left-wing ideologues in Rutherford County, which is interesting because
They're coming, and they've been coming.
yeah, but it's interesting because Rutherford County is one of the highest rated school systems in is it I know it's in Tennessee it is
Yes.
but
And we have one of the top 10 schools in the nation,
yeah
and that's Central Magnet School.
Oh.
I think it's either number 1 or number 2. It's like up there.
so it goes to show
So,
you
Well,
Yeah, it
one of
goes
the
to show you.
things, that I've learned, I don't know if you've studied much about cultural Marxism, but it started in Frankfurt, Germany, came to this country when Hitler ran those communists out of Germany. They established themselves at Columbia University. Over the years, it spread throughout our higher education system. Well, guess where our teachers go to get a teacher's degree?
Yeah.
From our communist re-education camps. And
Right.
so, the secondary education is going to be permeated with these people. you
Right.
know. I mean, it already is,
It is, and
Yeah.
I think it's getting more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And some
Well,
of my kids, because they know where I stand.
Yeah.
And they've been brought up in church.
Right.
They know I'm a conservative. They know my beliefs. They know I'm a
Right.
constitutionalist.
Right.
And that's what I've taught them, growing up. So it's kind of humorous when they come home from school after hearing a teacher speak one way,
Right.
and they know that's not correct.
Right. Right.
But they keep their mouth closed because they
Right.
don't want
Right.
criticism from the teacher. But they come home and I'm the first one they tell.
Yeah.
And it's kind of maddening. I was going to say sickening, but it's maddening, because almost like an agenda that's trying to,
Right.
you're not brainwashing my kid, but
Right.
it's working on others.
And that's the thing, you raise kids to be in church, you raise them good values and everything, then you turn them over to these communist re-education
Exactly.
camps,
Yep.
And but the good thing, I feel like that I've maybe had an impact because this kid right here is one of the smartest guys I know. Okay.
Seems pretty smart.
He don't like to hear me say that, but he's borderline genius. Oh, he is a genius.
Nice.
Tricked him.
But he'll tell me stuff that that it took me till I was in my 40s to learn. He knows him already. He's in his 20s.
Right.
But anyway, he's pretty conservative. And I think most of the
Good.
people in my family are pretty conservative, even though they've been through the educational system. And I
Right.
hope I've countered a lot of that.
Yeah. That's all we can hope.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why it's important. Like in his case, he's starting to be pretty conservative now, and
In whose case?
and Mr. Catrone.
Me.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, you can't point. It's a podcast.
He's come a
It's
long
an
way.
audio podcast.
Yeah, I
Wow.
wanted to point that out because
But-
just being a listener on the other side, I would have assumed he was still talking about his
He is.
grandson.
he is from New York. I
New
mean,
York, yeah.
He's got that accent.
Can you tell?
Welcome to Tennessee.
now
Where'd you park the car?
The garage.
it's Massachusetts. But,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
dang. Yeah, what do I know?
well, this is a good place to end this, Pat. I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
I think this has been a great show and everything. We've learned a lot and appreciate But anyway, everybody, goodbye. See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you.
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 Time.
Thank you.